Well, I have been asked, what is the secret of the elusive pens? What is the secret behind the dip pen, the ink, the brushes? So, it's all explained here. Well, hello and good morning. My name is Kieron Seamons, and this is my Inky World. And I have got I've got a question, and it reads, it's from PD World. So if you're out there, this video is for you, and all you other people, you can watch as well. Okay, so he said, can you give me a hint as to what kind of brushes, inks, pens, nibs that you use? Really nice work. Thank you very much. It is a question that does come up quite often. And I sometimes feel like it should be a bigger question. It should be a bigger answer, I should say. It should be a bigger answer. It should be something that's kind of like, well, I used the 2.6x on this, and I used the 9.2 blah 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 on that, and it should be some kind of real technical and maybe in my younger years it would have been very, very, you know, if the new 0.6 pen came out, I had to have one. In these recent years, I have simplified down to what works for me, and what captures the mood and the feeling that I want. So, I do use quite thick paper. I see a lot of people drawing on this type of A4 floppy paper. That's okay for doodling and scribbling around, but it's not professional paper. And I do like to use a thicker paper. At the moment, I am using actually using a C White paper at the moment, and it's a 300 cartridge paper, 300 GSM, and it's thick enough that I can really work into with a nib. And I find with some of the thinner paper, when you're starting to get very excited and you start to hack away at the paper will fall apart. So if I'm doing a demonstration, as I do most days, I do a demonstration of drawing. It's not a piece of work for a book or anything like that, which I kind of treat slightly different. On these kind of demonstration drawings, I do use a very thick paper. I do like a 300, or, you know, even like the 260s or something like that are fine. But it needs to be thick enough that can take a little bit of passion. And so in this case, I'm using a 300 on this demonstration for today's drawing. I do use some of the other papers. I do use a slightly thinner 170 is okay. I prefer a 220, and that paper basically has a little bit of a tooth to it. It has a little bit of a cartridge paper feeling to it. And I've tried some of the smoother, more compressed papers, and I find that everything is just, the ink just runs and you lose control. And most of my drawing is about control. Although it's wild and splishy splashy, it is controlled, and the paper controls what I do. Now with it comes down to the fact of nibs, I try again not to get too formatted. I try not to get too regulated into knowing the nib. And again, in some forms, I find that if I use the same nib, I mean, I do, as you can see, I've got loads of boxes of nibs all over the place. I've got Brooklyn school pens there, just in a stripy type of box. I've got ball pens. I've got Geo Hughes pens. I did use a lot of Geo Hughes pens at one point, and to be honest, I actually bought a lot of them at the beginning. I did like them, and they kind of restricted me. I mean, it sounds very. I'll try and compare it to some of the other nibs so you can see it. But I mean, here's the straight ballpoint. Here's where it gets a little bit crazy about nibs. And these are the school pens. These are number 5 fine. Can you see that? And then you have the Geo Hughes, which is a little bit thinner. Now, they're very, very constant, to be honest. They're very kind of, what are these little ball pens? Let's have a look. But what I try and also not to do, see, these are just like a golden version, sorry. And they are, in my mind, they're too heavy. They're too thick, basically. And you can see that. And it's a very straight nib. There's nothing much to it. And compared to a Geo Hughes, again, it's quite a big, strong, bulky nib. So I do use them, and I do set the pens up. When I set up my pens, I set up my pens in an array of nibs. And for that reason, I will set up a Geo Hughes. I'll set up a Brooklyn ball pen, and then I'll have the harder pens, and I'll have gold pens, and I'll have flexi pens, and I'll have a whole range of maybe 20 nibs that are sitting there. And the reason for it is when I'm drawing, I'm not thinking about, oh, I need a DX2, or I'm thinking, well, here I need something thinner. I need something a bit more gentle. And I'll look around for something like, oh, that's quite a gentle one. And I'll swap the nib over and I'll do something very fine and very gentle and very whatever. And then I'll think, right, I need some weight on this side. And I'll go into a brush. And again, I have probably 30 brushes. I don't know if I can turn this around, but you can see that there, the side, I've got about 30 brushes there in all the different pots. And they are basically all there in the same approach. That I don't really want to get to the stage of being tied down to restrictions about all the brushes are the same, all the nibs are the same. So I do get very much into the approach. I like to pick up I will just be drawing and I'll be thinking, I want something thick, I want something really heavy, and I'll grab a couple of brushes. You'll see it in the displays. I will grab a couple of brushes and say, oh, this one's, oh, that's a nice thick one. I'll go, oh, that's a nice thin one. That'll be better. And I kind of balance it out as I'm drawing. And I will choose things and pens and nibs and inks and brushes and whatever as I'm going. But I'd probably say my most consistent pen is the Geo Hughes. But, you know, I would probably say that it's probably because I've bought so many of them. At one point I bought, you know, about 10 boxes or something. But it's not really, it's, you know, in a lot of cases I do find that it comes down to the artist. The artist is the person that is putting the weight on the hand. And the approach for the way of drawing and the style of drawing. And while I might say, oh, go and buy this and go and buy that, for you, it might be a very, very different approach. You might draw in a much more light style. You might be a very gentle hand. And in that case, a Geo Hughes is not for you. Geo Hughes is it's like a brick. It's hard. It's very difficult to get any flex out of it. And that is why in so many of my drawings you will see I'm drawing away and I'll go ping, and the nib will go flying past my ear, because they break. They're very brittle and they're very hard. But because they are that hard, it does limit my line. It does force me to put more feeling into a line. So I will have a very light line, I'll have a thick line, I'll have a broken line, I'll have whatever. And that is all from those. And as I'm looking down at my nibs, you can see for example, there, that's another nib that's just sitting there on the side. And next to a Geo Hughes, it's massively different. And if I push the top, you'll probably see how much flex that has got. That's incredible. And if I push the top of the Geo Hughes, there's almost nothing. So, again, it's great to get into tools. I mean, I've got loads of different pens. There's a lovely... This one's quite... This is a very flexible nib. Look how much you can bend that. And I do have flex pens down there. And I've also got pens that I've bought. You know, I quite often buy a bag of mixed nibs. And although for the kind of the pro artist, it is a little bit madness because you're getting a bag of bits. But for me, as a professional artist, it inspires me because I'm finding something. There's a little very, very similar to the Hughes, which are very golden. Sorry, with all the ink on it. I don't really look after my nibs, as you well know. They're all covered in ink, and I do find that by having a variation of nibs, I mean, I'll just pick up a couple just to show you the variations, and you can see over a couple of nibs how different they all are. You know, from that one to that one. So don't restrict yourself. And I do find it's one of the things that I like about my style is that I'm quite open to get in there and find a nib. I mean, you know, there's so many different styles of nibs there. I've got about 50 pens there, and I just change the nibs. And sometimes I'll just have a bag on the side and I'll say, I'm getting too happy, if you know what I mean. I'm getting too, like, I know what I'm doing. And that kind of bugs me a little bit sometimes. So I will pull a holder and I'll dip my hand in a lucky bag and I'll pull out a nib and I'll think, oh, that looks odd. Put it on. And then I'll start drawing with that. And I have to, suddenly my brain has to wake up. My brain has to start to calculate what this nib is doing. Why is it so different? What is the good side of it? What is the bad side of it? What are the benefits of this nib compared to one of the others? So it is, and also recently I've been getting back to my, see, there's a tiny little nib. It's about half the size of the Geo Hue one. I've been getting back to the brush pens. This is a Staedtler one. I bought these about 95. Oh my god, it's like 100 billion years ago. And it's just a brush pen, and I love those. And I used to draw the comic with, and I'm starting to draw the comic with again. I'm trying to get back into using the brush pen. And it's another form of recalculating your brain. In the same way that for you kind of digital people, you would be using Photoshop. And then you would jump across and use Procreate or Adobe something else or some kind of other art software. You have to kind of get in there and you have to kind of go, right, what does that button do? What does that button do? And you start bringing all the, oh, that's a nice texture. Oh, and your brain starts getting excited and you start saying, well, I could paint some kind of grizzly bear with that. I could paint the moon with that. And you start to think and you start to wake your mind up. And a lot of my drawing is hopefully about kind of trying to keep your brain alive, keeping it moving. Inks. At the moment, I've kind of, I used to use a lot of Winsor Newton, and I'm kind of feeling like it's getting a little bit too thick. I don't know, it kind of, again, if for a different type of artist, if you're a very slow artist and you're a very patient artist, Winsor Newton is gorgeous. If you're very fast and you're very quick and you want that fluidity in the ink, I quite enjoy the Talons. The Talons has given me the speed, it's given me that kind of quickness, and it's there behind me when I'm drawing. Whereas I find sometimes with some of the thicker inks, Winsor Newton being one of them. If I'm drawing very, very quick, I find sometimes I'm drawing and I'm left behind. Like, where's my line going? But then I've probably got about, well, I mean, again, I could probably show you the bottles of ink, but there's a whole shelf there of litres of ink. There's a litre of Winsor Newton, there's a litre of Talons, there's a litre of so many Rytec and Bilko and Liquid Draw, and there's 1,000 different types of bottles there. And I've even done it with some of the smaller bottles. Sometimes I would just go in and pick up a small bottle of ink. What's this one? This is a German one. There you go. Can you see that? Can you read that? And that's a beautiful ink. And so far I haven't found big enough bottles. That bottle would last me probably 3 days. And that is a beautiful German ink, I believe. And again, they they do it in small bottles. And one of the reasons why I used to buy a lot of the, like even with the Winsor Newtons, the bottles are so small. That's probably 2 drawings. So I do kind of lean also not towards, about the bigger formats of ink. The Bombay inks are lovely if you're using the kind of permanent inks. And also the difference between that and the liquid draw, as I've said many times in my videos, that at least they have a pipette, so you can kind of suck up a huge draw of ink and put it in a ink top, and you can mix it up. And whereas some of the liquid draw ones, beautiful inks. I love the liquid draw. I love the consistency of it. It's a little bit wetter, but it's beautiful. Very vibrant colours. And why do they put it in such a top that you just simply cannot get your pen in? I cannot get some of these pens, when I try to put them in the top, it stops about there. It's like I can't even, move my finger. It stops about there, and I can't even get it into the bottom of the jar. So each ink has its beauty and has its drawback. So explore your inks, and you don't have to go wild. Buy some of the little small bottles and just try out different inks and see what works for you. I would love to get that company to send me like 10 litres so I could really test it out. If you are watching that company, send me 10 litres of that and I will test out your ink for you. But I also I'm kind of addicted to ink, so I will go in and buy these kind of different. I love the jar and that. I just had to have a bottle. The diamond inks, or diamond, or whatever you want to call them, they're nice, but they're all water-based inks. They're all kind of like fountain pen inks. But again, I do draw with them because they are wetter, and I do like that wet side to an ink. Brushes, I have absolutely no preference for a brush. For the very, 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 very simple reason that I don't know if I can kind of even show you some of these brushes without being embarrassed. There you go. There's one of my brushes. I don't know if you can see that. Look at the state of it. Okay. So that was actually a white Sabler, and it was a beautiful one by Horrid Henry. And it was a beautiful brush, and I loved it so much that I kind of beat it to death. But I love it. I've got so many really posh, expensive brushes mixed in with some really cheap brushes that I found. What brushes are sitting around here? That's a codeine. And I've bought thousands of brushes, and I bought them all for different reasons. I like that one because it's a square tip. I like that one because it's a point, and that's just a graduate one. It's just a cheap, but again, it's got such a soft feeling to the tip. that I just keep coming back to it. And I've gone through about 1,000 of those graduate brushes for the simple reason that they are just delightful. They are just so to the point, you know. Whereas you find some of the other ones just, they lose their tip and they just fatten out at the end. But I never throw a brush away. I've got thousands of them. And I will kind of get to a point where I kind of, in my brain as I'm drawing, I'll say, I need a big, fat, messed up end brush here to get some texture. And I'll just go for that Robert Simmons brush there, and I'll dab it down, and it will just fill the void, you know. So, what else? A blue pen. If I'm doing illustrations, or I'm working on the comic, as you've seen, I'll use the old color arrays, and these are an old animation pencil. Where we always used to draw things in blue pencil and work through our drawings. Blah 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 blah. Pencils, I've got Goldwing pencils, and Goldwing is lovely, but again, probably back in the animation days, they were very, very, and I just bought so many different, you know. So there isn't really a refined answer to it. It's not like, well, I use the DX1 and I use the P49. It isn't really like that. It's more about touching in with the feeling of you, and find out what is your drawing style and what kind of drawings do you like to do. Do you like to draw manga? Do you like to do sketch form? Do you like to whatever? Do you like Ronald Searle? You know, you know. And for the people that know, you know, Ronald Searle used a fountain pen. And a fountain pen is a fantastic. I've got loads of fountain pens. I don't know if I can grab a couple, but I've got lots of fountain pens. This was a beautiful one. It was a gift. Beautiful green pen. And it is by a sailor, and it is fantastic. And it is a Fude nib, so it has a free hair at the end. It has a kind of jump at the end of the nib. It kind of points up, and it gives you a nice kind of thick and thin as you're tipping. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful nib. And then I've got the Jinhao ones, which are cheap and cheerful, and they're just as lovely. And I will sit there of a night, and I'll pull out my lovely fountain pen, and I'll sketch in my sketchbook, and it's delightful. It is absolutely delightful. And if you are using a lot of ink, and you do get fed up of going draw, draw, dip, draw, draw, dip, draw, draw, dip, draw with a fountain pen. Fountain pen is exactly why, you know, you see Ronald Searle would do it. You know, he would use his fountain pen to keep that constant flow of ink. And, you know, I have got into the occasions with some of the cheaper fountain pens. I do find they kind of bung up a lot. Probably the main reason why I don't draw with a fountain pen, because they are so beautiful. I just bought my sister a Mont Blanc pen, and she's over the moon with it. It's exactly what Ronald Searle used to draw with, and they are this constant flow of quality. But do you draw in that style? You know, I would probably see someone like Quentin Blake would probably draw with a fountain pen, you know, because you can see that constant flow in his line. And I know that when he uses a dip pen, he uses Higgins ink. I've got a bottle of Higgins ink somewhere. It's got a very angular little bottle, lovely little thing, which again was a gift from my friend Natalie. Bought me this lovely bottle of Higgins ink, and again, it is such a small, delicate little bottle. It's like about this size, you know, with a long kind of lid, but it's so delicate. I kind of I would kind of dip into it in small stages because I feel like I'm using so much volume of ink. I do draw with brush, I do draw with nib, I do draw with anything that I have. But my point is to try to get into a point of being flexible with your style. What is your drawing style? And kind of break it down and saying, well, it's quite a constant line. You know, I see some of those people drawing and they do this very constant line. If that's your style, then maybe a fountain pen would work. Maybe a harder nib would work. I don't really get on with the flex nibs. I've bought so many of them and I've broken so many of them. For the simple reason that they have this cut on the side of the nib. I don't have one out at the moment. Yeah, there's an odd one. Look at that. And that is really, really, I know it's an ugly thing, but it's so nice. It's like a mapping nib. And it goes in and does all like the little details. But there's another form of ink. Here, look. You can get these big chunks of solid ink. So it's kind of like a grinding board, and that is your ink. It comes in this Chinese block, and you put a little bit of water and you grind your ink, and that's beautiful for kind of doing like Chinese water paintings and kind of getting a nice grey tone to, you know, the kind of from black to kind of grey, this kind of blending tone. I use Ecoline a lot for the colouring, which is nice. But again, look into your style, and I hope that has helped you in some way. But that you're kind of jumping into a world of inks, pens, brushes, and it really comes down to you buying a couple of brushes and then analysing what you've bought. Buy a nib. And then saying, I don't like that nib because it's too soft. Okay, so let's find a harder nib. And then going and finding a harder nib. It's hard, but it doesn't have enough flex. And then kind of fine-tuning down what you do like. But for me, I do like that flexibility. I do like to reach down and grab a nib and go, oh my God, what is that? Let's try it. You know, I do love that excitement about it. I do get very, very overly excited when I'm drawing. I do use charcoal. Also, I use the kind of big blocks of charcoal. I do find the sticks of charcoal, which a lot of people love. They love that kind of the long sticks of charcoal, which I've got lots of it over there. It's called willow charcoal. And I do find, for me, I'm too heavy-handed with it, and the heavy hand in my drawing style makes it fall apart. And so there you are. I'm very, very open, and I'm very, very flexible with my inks and paints, and I hope that has helped in some way, Mr. PB World. I hope that's helped you in breaking down and giving you some kind of hint in what I do. But then again, I'd probably do a video in a month's time, and you could probably look back at one of my old videos. I would probably be saying different things because, you know, part of being the artist is that you will try an ink and then you go, oh my God, that's the best ink ever. I'm going to use that forever. And then you'll probably use it for 3 months and you go, oh, what's that ink? And then you know, and I do find that's the part of the luxury of being an artist. It is a luxury. So I hope that has helped, and thank you for watching. Some kind of hints and tips of nibs and ink. There you go. I hope that helped in some kind of way. I hope it answered your question, and I hope you'll come back and watch some more videos. And I'll see you again all very, 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 very soon. See you soon. Bye-bye.